Welcome to this explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here today because we are going to unpack something truly fascinating. We're going to peel back the curtain and look at the invisible infrastructure that keeps our society functioning before, during, and after a major crisis strikes. It's a massive, incredibly complex machine, but by the end of our time together, you're going to see exactly how all these moving parts work together to save lives. So think about this for a second. What happens when the worst actually occurs? Just imagine your own community, your own neighborhood, suddenly facing an unforeseen crisis. A massive flood, an earthquake, maybe a severe storm. Suddenly, this abstract idea of government policy feels intensely personal, doesn't it? When the lights completely go out and the waters start to rise, what exactly is the plan? Okay, let's dive into this with a baseline definition. Notice how disaster management isn't just about the government swooping in to react after the fact. It's a highly deliberate series of steps taken by everyone. We're talking the government, civil society, and yes, individuals like you and me. The goal isn't just to respond, but to prepare for, prevent, and reduce the impact of these events, whether they're natural forces or man-made emergencies. Survival, as it turns out, is a deeply structured, collective effort. To make this massive blueprint for survival a little easier to grasp, here is our agenda. We'll be covering understanding disaster management, before the strike, into the storm, the road to recovery, the power of communication, and finally, how India manages disasters. Let's jump right into part 1, understanding disaster management and the cycle of survival. And this brilliantly illustrates the core concept of the whole system. Modern planners don't look at a crisis as a single, isolated event with a clear beginning and end. Actually, they view it as a continuous loop. The cycle never stops. It's literally the ongoing heartbeat of civil defense. You have the pre-disaster risk reduction phase, focusing on prevention and preparedness, then the immediate response during the disaster itself, and finally, the post-disaster recovery phase, which just rolls right back into mitigation for the next inevitable event. Moving right along to part 2, before the strike, the pre-disaster phase. So before a hazard even arrives on our doorstep, the primary goal is proactively reducing life and property loss. Now, within this window, there are two distinct concepts that honestly get confused all the time: prevention and mitigation. Prevention is about devising safeguards to stop the impacts entirely. Think of planning a new city from scratch in a way that inherently minimizes the risk of flooding altogether. Mitigation, on the other hand, acknowledges that a hazard will hit, but it aims to reduce its effects. A perfect example? Adopting super strict building codes so that when an earthquake happens, the buildings bend instead of breaking. But how do authorities actually know what to prevent or mitigate? Well, they conduct a disaster risk assessment. It sounds complicated, but we can break it down into a straightforward 4-step checklist. Step 1 is hazard assessment, figuring out the nature and extent of the threat. Step 2 is vulnerability assessment, evaluating exactly who and what will be harmed. Step 3 is capacity assessment, knowing what resources we already have to fight back. And step 4, which is absolutely fascinating, is people's perception of risk. Because think about it, if the public doesn't believe a threat is real, even the most perfect plans will completely fail. Which brings us to preparedness and early warning. Why does this matter? Because proactive readiness literally saves lives. Preparedness is all about ensuring maximum readiness through constant training, evaluating, and correcting. Like running standard fire drills and evacuation rehearsals. Pairing that with early warning systems, which monitor the situation and instantly blast critical knowledge to the public, is a total game changer. For instance, India has developed a highly sophisticated tsunami early warning system for exactly this purpose. All right, part 3, into the storm, the during disaster phase. The hazard has arrived. This thrusts us into a critical, incredibly high-stakes window where every single second counts. In this phase, the actions taken by first responders are immediate. The main goal? Emergency relief to stabilize the situation, right then and there. They're rapidly setting up control rooms to centralize command. They are putting those rehearsed contingency plans into action. They're actively issuing warnings, executing evacuations, rushing people to safe designated areas, and rendering immediate medical aid to those who need it most. It is an all-out, organized sprint against the clock. Now for part 4, the road to recovery, the post-disaster phase. Once the immediate threat has finally passed, the absolute urgency slows down, but the work is far from over. As communities navigate this long aftermath, it's vital to clearly distinguish between the two main pillars of recovery here: rehabilitation and reconstruction. Rehabilitation is essentially the short-term band-aid. It's providing temporary public utilities and interim housing to victims just to get them by. Reconstruction, though, that's the long-term cure. It involves returning communities to their pre-disaster functioning, but with significantly improved infrastructure. We're talking long-term development like constructing sturdy embankments against flooding or adding irrigation facilities to drought-proof an area. The philosophy here is we don't just rebuild, we build back better. Next up is part 5, the power of communication. So what is the invisible thread that keeps all 3 of these chronological phases connected? The crucial takeaway here is that reliable communication systems are just as important as physical infrastructure. Communication is the absolute lifeline that connects affected people with first responders. It links panicked family members back together. It allows for the rapid spread of vital, life-saving information through telecommunication networks. Ultimately, accessible information systems act as the fundamental key to a community's overall resilience. Without communication, the entire management cycle just completely collapses. And finally, part 6. How India manages disasters, exploring a real paradigm shift. Let's actually examine a real-world application of these concepts. Over the last few decades, India has undergone a massive evolutionary shift, and unfortunately, it was forged in tragedy. In 1999, a completely devastating cyclone struck. Just 2 years later, in 2001, the horrific Bhuj earthquake caused massive, widespread damage. These specific, monumental tragedies led to the formation of a high-powered committee under J.C. Pant to completely rethink the entire national system. By 2002, recognizing the desperate need for a highly coordinated, security-focused response, the Disaster Management Division was officially shifted under the Ministry of Home Affairs. Now, what's really interesting about this restructuring is the profound policy twist that came out of it. The government officially moved away from an old approach that merely handed out reactive financial relief after the damage was already done. Instead, they evolved into a holistic, proactive approach that addresses the entire, continuous disaster management cycle we discussed earlier. To make this kind of holistic approach actually work across such a vast nation, the system expertly delegates highly specific hazards to the specialized ministries best equipped to handle them. For example, avalanches are managed by the Ministry of Defense's Border Road Organization. Biological emergencies fall straight to the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. Cyclones and earthquakes, those are monitored by the Ministry of Earth Sciences. Floods go to the Ministry of Jal Shakti, while urban floods specifically go to Housing and Urban Affairs. Droughts are handled by Agriculture, and forest fires by the Ministry of Environment and Forests. It is quite literally a masterclass in organized delegation. We've explored the cycle, the phases, the communication networks, and a real-world national strategy. With this blueprint for survival now fully visible, I want to leave you with one final thought. How prepared is your own community for the next test of the cycle? Take a look into your own city's invisible infrastructure, because as we've learned today, disaster management is everyone's responsibility. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, keep asking questions, and stay prepared out there.